I want to start with a question that might shake you. What do you do when life hands you injustice so deep that your heart screams for revenge? Do you hold on to that fire, letting it consume you from the inside out, or do you find another way, one that seems impossible, yet carries the power to heal not only yourself but entire nations? Today, I want to take you on a journey through the story of Nelson Mandela, a man who lived this very question, and in answering it, left us a map for surviving a world still burning with hate, division, and inequality. This video is not about history alone. It's about survival, leadership, and the choices you and I face right now. Because let's be honest, you don't have to be locked in a prison cell for decades to feel imprisoned. Maybe you're trapped by anger over betrayal, by resentment from past wounds, or by the weight of injustice you see in the world around you. Mandela's story shows us that freedom is not just walking out a cell. It is freeing yourself from the chains of bitterness that hold you hostage. So, as you listen, I invite you to think about your own life. Who has wronged you? Where does your heart still hold on to revenge? And what would it mean for you to let go? Not because they deserve forgiveness, but because you deserve peace. Stay with me, because in the next few moments, you'll see how Mandela's choice between forgiveness and revenge is not a distant political story. It is a living lesson for every one of us searching for a way to bring peace into a world and into a heart on fire. When I think about Mandela's journey, I don't picture him first as a world leader, smiling in front of cheering crowds. No, I picture a young lawyer in South Africa, watching as people denied the most basic rights. Black children forbidden from attending decent schools. Families torn apart because of where they could or could not live. Police brutality as a daily reminder of who was in power and who was not. The system was called apartheid. But at its core, it was legalized hatred. It's easy to imagine how anger could grow in such a place. Every wall screamed division. Every law whispered humiliation. And every day made young Mandela more aware that the world he lived in was built to crush him. Yet, instead of surrendering to despair, he began to dream. Not a small dream for himself, but a radical dream for an entire nation. Freedom, equality, and dignity for every person, no matter their skin color. But let me pause here, because this is where you and I can already connect. Haven't you felt the sting of being underestimated, overlooked, or treated unfairly? It may not have been on the scale of apartheid, but the pain of injustice is universal. And in that pain, we are always faced with a choice: to let harden us, or to let it shape us into someone stronger. Mandela's story begins in a world set against him, but the seed of his greatness was planted there. He didn't know yet the years of prison that awaited him. He didn't know yet how heavy the burden of leadership would feel. What he did know was this: no one was going to hand him justice. He would have to carve it out of stone with his own hands. And that conviction, that refusal to surrender, was the soil where his extraordinary life began. And then came the walls. Thick, cold, merciless. Mandela was sentenced to prison for 27 years, locked away because his dream threatened those who feared equality. Imagine that. Nearly 3 decades stolen, every sunrise marked by iron bars, every night echoing with the silence of life on hold. But the true prison was not just a concrete cell. The greater prison was a temptation to let hatred take root. Day after day, he had reasons to grow bitter. Guards who insulted him, leaders who painted him as a criminal, the world outside moving on while he remained trapped in time. For most of us, just a few years of that would harden the heart until only revenge remained. And here's where the story turns deeply human, because Mandela was not a saint carved from stone. He wrestled with that anger. He felt it boiling inside him, the desire to make them pay for every stolen day, every humiliating moment. That is the same struggle many of us face. Maybe not behind bars, but behind invisible walls of pain and betrayal. The fight against bitterness is the hardest fight of all. The conflict was not simply external. It was internal. Would Mandela let the cruelty of others decide the man he would become? Or would he choose a different path, even if it cost him more suffering? That question pulsed through every moment of his imprisonment. And while the world only saw a man locked away, inside that cell Mandela was shaping something more powerful than revenge, the discipline of forgiveness. Through all those years of confinement, Mandela held on to a goal. So clear became his guiding light. He wanted freedom, But not just the freedom to walk out of a prison cell. He wanted freedom for a people chained by centuries of injustice. He wanted children, black and white, to walk into the same classroom with the same opportunities. He wanted men and women to stand side by side as equals, not divided by skin. His desire was not small, and that's what makes it so powerful for us today. Think about your own goals. How often are they limited by the wounds of your past? How often do we dream only of payback, of proving them wrong, instead of building something bigger and brighter? Mandela's dream was not to destroy those who had oppressed him, but to transform them into partners in building a new nation. That's not revenge, that's vision. Even in prison, he never stopped preparing for that vision. He studied, he listened, he sharpened his understanding of human nature. And most importantly, he trained his heart to resist the poison of hate, because he knew if he stepped into freedom carrying bitterness, he would still be a prisoner. And maybe that's where his story becomes a mirror for us. What are we chasing today? Is it revenge, vindication, or something larger? Peace, wholeness, healing? Mandela's desire was not just to win a fight. It was to end the fight altogether. His goal was reconciliation, and that goal became the compass that carried him through 27 years of darkness. When Mandela was finally released from prison, the world celebrated. Cameras flashed, crowds cheered, and his first steps outside the prison gates felt like the sunrise after a very long night. But freedom did not mean peace. If anything, the battle was just beginning, because while Mandela was ready to forgive, many of his people were not. I want you to imagine the atmosphere in South Africa. At that time, decades of oppression had left deep wounds. Families had lost fathers, mothers, children to the cruelty of apartheid. The scars were raw, the anger boiling. People did not just want change, they wanted payback. Streets were charged with a desire for revenge. It was like standing on a powder keg. One spark could ignite a war that would consume the entire nation. And here was Mandela, a man just released after 27 years, expected to lead. Yet the people who trusted him also demanded blood. Make them suffer as we have suffered, some whispered. Give us justice through punishment. This was a new obstacle Mandela faced. Not the prison bars of Robben Island, but the prison of expectation, the weight of a nation crying out for retaliation. Think about this for a moment. Have you ever felt pressured by others to respond with anger when deep down you knew it would only make things worse? Have you felt trapped between what others demand and what you know is right? That was Mandela's burden. The world thought his hardest fight was against a government that locked him up, but his true battle was persuading his own people that revenge would not bring peace. It is far easier to choose hate. It is far easier to mirror the cruelty that was done to you. But leadership demands more than echoes. It demands vision. Mandela knew that if he fueled the fire of revenge, the entire country would burn to ashes. And yet, turning his people away from vengeance would mean walking against the tide of their deepest emotions. That was the obstacle no one else could face. But Mandela did. The true turning point came not through speeches alone, but through actions that shocked both enemies and supporters. Mandela understood something vital. Forgiveness is not just a word. It is a demonstration. And so, he chose to embrace symbols that once represented his oppression. He shook hands with former enemies. He invited his jailers to his inauguration. And perhaps the most famous act of all, he put on the green and gold jersey of the South African rugby team, a team loved by whites but despised by blacks. That single moment was electrifying. Picture it. A black president wearing the symbol of a white man's sport, standing in a stadium full of people who once feared his rise to power. It was not weakness. It was brilliance. Because Mandela was telling his people, if I can forgive, so can you. He was sending a message that reconciliation was not about forgetting the past, but about choosing not to repeat it. Forgiveness became his strategy, his weapon, his revolution. And this is what makes the story so powerful for us today. In our personal lives, turning points rarely arrive with stadium cheers. They come in quieter moments, when we decide not to answer an insult with another insult, when we choose not to feed the cycle of bitterness in our families or workplaces. Like Mandela, we are called to show through action that peace is possible. And here lies the heart of the lesson. Forgiveness is not easy and it is not natural. It feels unnatural because everything inside us cries for revenge. But Mandela's greatness was not in denying his anger. It was in mastering it. He turned his pain into power by refusing to let it dictate his future. That turning point changed not only his destiny, but the destiny of a nation. The result of Mandela's choice was astonishing. Instead of descending into civil war, South Africa began the painful but necessary journey of reconciliation. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was established, giving both victims and perpetrators a chance to speak their truth, to confess, to seek healing. It was not perfect, and it did not erase the scars, but opened the door to something greater than revenge: understanding. Mandela became president, but more than that, he became a symbol. His face stood for hope, his actions for unity. And while the problems of inequality and injustice did not vanish overnight, the fact that a peaceful transition was possible stunned the world. He showed that a man emerging from 27 years of prison could choose not to destroy his enemies, but to sit at the same table with them. That choice prevented a bloodbath and gave South Africa a new identity. Now, I want you to reflect on what this means for us. Resolution in our lives is not always about winning. Sometimes it's about refusing to lose ourselves to bitterness. Mandela's resolution was to create a future where children could walk to school without fear, where families could build without hatred hovering over them. His resolution shows us that healing is greater than victory, and peace is stronger than revenge. This is what true leadership looks like: not domination, but transformation; not vengeance, but vision. And the result of such leadership is a legacy that still speaks to us today. Now, let's bring this story into our present moment. Look around. We see racism tearing communities apart. We see wars raging across nations. We see inequality creating bitterness and resentment that divides families, neighbors, even entire societies. The world today is on fire, just as South Africa once was. And the question we face is the same question Mandela faced. Do we choose forgiveness or revenge? You and I may not lead a nation, but every day we lead our own lives. In our families, our workplaces, our relationships, we are faced with smaller versions of the same choice. Do we cling to grudges that poison us, or do we let go so that healing can begin? Mandela's legacy is not just history. It is a mirror. It shows us what is possible when one person dares to forgive. And here is where I want to invite you to reflect. Think about someone who hurt you. Think about the resentment you might still carry. What would it look like to release that anger? Not to excuse the wrong, but to free yourself from being chained to it. Imagine how different our world would be if more people chose reconciliation over revenge. So, I want to hear from you. In the comments, share your thoughts. Do you believe forgiveness is possible in today's world? How do you think Mandela's example can guide us in our personal lives, in our communities, and even in global conflicts? Let's make this more than a story. Let's make it a conversation. Because at the end of the day, Mandela's message is a call to action. If forgiveness could stop a war in South Africa, maybe it can stop the wars inside us, too. Maybe it can heal wounds we've carried far too long. And maybe, just maybe, it can teach us to build bridges where walls once stood. True strength is not in striking back, but in lifting the world higher through forgiveness.